Welcome to a very interesting topic in civic education, human rights. You need to know your rights as a citizen of Zambia. So, we are going to look at the following subtopics: the historical development of human rights, characteristics of human rights, and the categories of human rights. Pay attention so that we move together. Okay, so what are human rights? Human rights are simply entitlements that one has because one is a human being. Take note of this word here. You have those entitlements because you are a human being. So everyone who is called a human being has got these entitlements. Now, what are entitlements? These are simply claims and freedoms. The claims and freedoms. For example, you have got the right to food, you've got the right to eat, the right to have shelter, to have clothes, and equality before the law. These are your claims and freedoms that you have. So in short, you can define human rights as the claims and freedoms one has because one is a human being. You end there. Now that we know what human rights are, we would like to know how human rights came about, the historical development of human rights. Human rights are as old as humanity, or they are as old as human beings. What do I mean? Human rights were there just since the first man, Adam, was on earth. Human rights were there. And now look at this. When you go into the Christian Bible, you find the golden rule, which says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. They asked this question in the exam. What does the golden rule state? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, there was a rule in the Bible that says eye for an eye. You remove an eye from your friend, you also be removed an eye. Eye for an eye. That was simply promoting equality. So, even in the past, human rights were there. That's why we are saying this, which is the golden rule, summarizes the rights and responsibilities of human beings towards one another. Which responsibilities? Of taking care of one another, loving each other. Because if you love your friend, you cannot hate him or her. That's the history of what? Human rights. Now, we had some earliest documents that talked about human rights. The first one was the Bible, first of all. But we had some earliest documents now, apart from the Bible itself. The Magna Carta of 1215. 1215. This was the first document to talk about human rights in the world. In the world. This one, in the world. First in the world. Then we had the Charter of Monday. The Charter of Monday was the first document to talk about human rights in Africa. So this one is in Africa. Now, this one, which is the Charter of Monday, is also known as the Souldiata Keita. This is because it was guaranteed by Souldiata Keita, who was the king of the Empire of Mali, also called Mande. That's why the document was named before his name, Charter of Monday. Then we had the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights. This one also talked about human rights. Now, these documents, which are the earliest, were not universal in nature. A question may come in the exam. Why are the earliest documents not known to be universal in nature? This is because they did not talk about the rights of women, children, slaves, economic and political groups. So they left some gaps. Therefore, they were not universal in nature. Are we together, students? How human rights came about. I've talked about the earliest documents that talked about human rights. Now I want to know how these rights came about, as known in the world today. First of all, there was the brutal killing of the Jews by the Nazi Germans. This was referred to as Holocaust during the Second World War. Government decided to establish the United Nations in 1945 with the idea of promoting international peace and prevent conflict. They thought, I think people will continue killing each other in the world. Let's form this union, which was the United Nations. This one was aimed at promoting international peace and prevent conflict. Now, it led to the drawing of the United Nations Charter. They drew a United Nations Charter in 1945. Are we together? This is history now. Now, in the United Nations Charter, member countries promised each other that, okay, us will be promoting peace, even us will be promoting peace. So they promised to promote respect and peace for human rights. They all promised that. After that, they formed a commission and assigned that commission with the duty of drafting the rights and freedoms declared in the charter. You see, they declared the rights and freedoms in this charter that was made in 1945. Now, when they formed a commission, it had the duty of drafting those rights now that were in the 1945 charter. The commission was chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, or Eleanor Roosevelt, depends on how you read it, but Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of the then President of America, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So this one was the wife of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And this one was the what? The President of America, United States of America at that time. This was the person who chaired the what? The commission. This commission that had the duty of drafting the rights and freedoms declared in the charter. So the commission, which was chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The rights and freedoms which were declared in the 1945 charter led to the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights now on 10th December 1948. So some may wonder, what is that Universal Declaration of Human Rights? This is simply a set of principles to which the United Nations countries commit themselves to provide all people of the world with human dignity. It's like countries, the member countries, promised each other. They agreed to say, let's promote peace. Whoever violates the rights, whoever infringes the rights of citizens, then they are doing against the what? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is what helps us to enjoy our rights in each and every country where we are. This is a brief history of how human rights came about. You can try to research more so that you clearly know how the human rights came about. But this is simply a brief history that will help you know how the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. Apart from that, let us talk about the characteristics of these human rights now. The characteristics. 1. Human rights are inherent. This means we are born with them. Human rights exist whether you are aware of them or not. Immediately you are born, you have the right to life. You see? Not even immediately you are born. Immediately the baby is conceived, immediately fertilization takes place, that is a life. We'll talk about that in Article 12 when we're talking about the Zambian Bill of Rights. Secondly, human rights are inalienable. That means they are inseparable. They cannot be given away or taken away. No, I want to say my human rights. That's not possible. Human rights are inalienable. Two, human rights are universal. They apply to all the people in the world. Right to life. Everyone, regardless of race, nationality, has got the right to life. Human rights are indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. This simply means human rights work hand in hand. When you break one right, that means you have broken all the rights. For example, we say every person has got the right to vote. Every person has got the right to life. Right to life here. Let me put right to life. Then, let me say you have broken this right here, the right to life. You have taken someone's life. Will this person vote? Will this person vote? Not at all. So that means when you break one right, you have broken all the other rights. Human rights are what? Indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. Are we together? Categories of human rights. Human rights are in three categories. We have civil and political rights, economic, social and cultural rights, and the collective rights. Let us talk about them one by one. The civil and political rights. These rights are also known as the first generation rights because they were the first to be known as human rights. These are simply the rights that prevent the government to interfere into the life of an individual. They prevent the government from interfering into the life of us individuals. Examples include the right to life. The government shouldn't kill you. The right to personal liberty. Protection from slavery or forced labor. Freedom of opinion. Freedom of expression. Freedom of assembly. Freedom of association. Freedom of movement. Freedom of conscience, and the other rights. These are referred to as civil and political rights. The economic and social cultural rights. These rights are also known as the second generation rights. They were the second to be discovered. This simply means the government should take action for everyone to enjoy adequate standards of economic, social, and cultural rights. The government should take action for everyone to enjoy these rights. For example, right to food. The government should ensure that every person in the country is having enough food to eat. That's why we blame the government whenever we don't have food. You see, because it's their duty. Right to employment. When you don't have employment, we always blame the government. Right to social security, right to education, healthy development, clean environment, and adequate housing. These are referred to as the economic, social, and cultural rights, also known as the second generation rights. The collective rights, which are the third generation rights. These are rights of people to be protected from attacks on their group identity and group interest. Group identity and group interest. We have right to self-determination, right to communicate, right to peace, right to natural resources, right to economic and social development. These are examples of the collective rights, also known as the third generation rights. What have we learned? What have we learned? First of all, we talked about human rights. Human rights are simply entitlements that one has because one is a human being. Entitlements, freedoms, or claims that one has because one is a human being. Historical development of human rights. Simply remember, first of all, the golden rule, eye for an eye, do unto others as you would love them to unto you. The earliest document, the Magna Charta 1215, the Charter of Monday 1222, first in Africa, first in the world, the English Bill of Rights. These were not universal because they didn't talk about the rights of women, children, slaves, economic and political rights. How human rights came about. First of all, there was the brutal killing of the Jews by the Nazi Germans. This killing was referred to as Holocaust during the Second World War. Now, government decided to establish the United Nations in 1945 with the idea of promoting international peace and prevent conflict. This led to the drawing of the United Nations Charter in 1945. Then they established or they formed a commission which was assigned with the duty to drafting the rights and freedoms declared in this charter. From that commission, it led to the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on 10th December 1948. This was simply a set of principles to which United Nations countries commit themselves to provide people of a world with human dignity. Characteristics of human rights. We've also talked about the categories of human rights. There are only what? 3 categories. Make sure you study these. Make sure you know them. Your rights are very important. Your rights are very important. Watch out for the part 2 where we'll talk about now the Zambian Bill of Rights. Since we've known what rights are, now we want to know what rights we have in Zambia. Make sure you don't miss the next part of the video. Bye bye.